Today we're talking all about excellence in our craft and why you don't want to publish too soon. If you've seen my video where I talk about the inner critic, you'll know that I don't want you to wait too long to get your work out there, but we also don't want to get our work out too soon. Especially as a Christian creative, we need to be especially mindful that we make quality content. So unfortunately, Christian creatives have a bad reputation for low quality work. If you've seen my first video, I talk a little bit about the lack of professional mentors in the Christian sphere. That's part of the problem. But the other part is the same issue that everybody has, even in the secular world, is rushing. I finished my first full-length manuscript when I was in high school, and I was so excited to get it out into the world. And back in the day, literary agents still took a lot of stuff by snail mail, and indie publishing was not nearly as acceptable or robust as it is now. And so I sent out a bunch of queries and got nothing back. Younger me was very disheartened and didn't understand why my books did not get picked up. There was a pretty good reason for it. And I'm glad they didn't get picked up. And I'm also glad at the time that indie publishing was not as awesome as it is today, because then I may have rushed and gotten my book out there way before it was ready, and I would have done myself a huge disservice. So I have 5 major reasons why you might want to wait to publish. Number 1, writing is a skill, and skills take time to develop. And writing a book is different than writing an essay or a short story. There is a whole art to writing a full-length book from beginning to end. Think about the first picture you ever drew. It wasn't ready for a gallery. The first sports game you ever played wasn't ready for the major leagues. And the first sound you made out of an instrument wasn't ready for the orchestra. Your book is very much the same. Odds are the first book you write isn't going to be ready for publication. And that's okay. That's pretty standard. But as always, there's exceptions to the rules. There's always going to be an exception. But that's the thing, they're exceptions. Most people aren't going to be an exception. And odds are the people who do publish their very first book spent a long time writing it. So between that first book I wrote in high school and now, I have written about 11 books, if I'm not forgetting any. And none of them have seen publication for good reasons. Now, the last one I am planning to get out in fall of 2026. So hopefully number 11 will be out there in the world before too long. But it wasn't until I wrote many books that I really started to feel like I knew what I was doing. And if you research some of the best writers, you'll find that this is not unusual. Most writers that publish traditionally have written more than one book before their published book. Obviously, these statistics change for indie books because you have complete control over whether or not you're publishing it. And it could be a good thing and it could be a bad thing. Now, obviously, like I've said before, I'm planning to indie publish now because many reasons. But as indie publishers, we definitely don't want to put our work out too soon. But back to the example of traditional publishing, for example, Brandon Sanderson, who has over 71 books published, and probably by the time this video hits, he's probably going to have 100 because he just writes that fast. That's an exaggeration. But he wrote somewhere between 12 and 13 books before one of those books got published. Another very famous writer wrote about, I'm not going to mention his name because I don't support his work, but he wrote about 4 books before he was traditionally published. And the average for traditionally published authors is about 3 to 4 books. So you don't necessarily have to be like me or Sanderson and wait until you've written a dozen books, but you can. But you probably should write about 3 or 4 before you publish one. So remember, as an author, your reputation starts with the very first book you put out there. And a bad reputation is hard to shake off. Now, granted, you could always change your name to a pen name, but why give your ego the bashing in the first place when you could have just waited a little longer and had a very successful launch? Now, the second reason I'm glad I waited is that learning your writing process is just as important as learning how to write. So over the years, I've learned a lot about my writing process, and every writer's process is going to look different from another writer. No one is going to have the exact same way that they approach creating a book. And that is absolutely normal and okay. But what that also means is that it takes time to figure out what works best for you, what's going to streamline your writing, and what's going to give you the best product in the shortest amount of time, which is important when you are trying to sell and make money on books. Because unfortunately, as much as some of us would just love to create, we do have to pay the bills. So, why is knowing your writing process important before you publish? There's a couple good reasons. One, if you go trad publishing, so like I said, some people get published on their first book, but it took them about a decade typically to write that first book to a state that was publishable. And the thing is, once their book is out there, now they have fans and they have agents, they have publishing companies that are wanting the next book because your publishing company wants an author that's going to produce more work. Because if you get a good reputation and you get a good following, it's going to be easier to sell your future books. But they're not going to wait a decade between each book. So you need to know how to write quickly, and if you've only written one book that took you about a decade to write, you're going to find yourself very stressed out trying to get the next book out. And this has happened to many authors who got big on the very first book they wrote. Now, as an indie publisher, you won't have a publishing company or a literary agent asking for the next book, but hopefully you did a good job with the first book and you have fans who want the next one. I read a book that I really liked, and it was supposed to be the first in a series. And the book was supposed to have come out this spring, and the authors disappeared. I wish I knew what happened. I would have liked the next book. But as an indie author, even if you're still working on the next book and you haven't disappeared off the face of this planet, your fans don't want to wait a decade between books. They want them at least within a year is kind of the standard, or two. So taking the time to learn your process before you publish will help you create work faster. It'll take pressure off of you once you actually have hit publish, and it will keep you from getting paralyzed by deadlines. Number three, why I'm glad I waited is simply life experiences. While I had a lot of experiences as I was growing up, we moved around a lot. So I got to see all kinds of places and people, and we went through a lot. I still was missing just a lot of the experience that comes with age. And that's really important for storytelling, at least for impactful storytelling. So there is a reason why most traditionally published authors are in their mid to late 30s before they ever get published, because your book is a reflection of your life experiences and what you understand about people and the world and different situations. And the more you know, the better your book is going to be. So as you're going through life and you're collecting both beautiful and heart-wrenching life experiences, you can use all of that for writing. And it'll make your stories deeper, more heartfelt, and more understanding of people and situations. And hopefully, you're learning about more than just how to write. A good writer also needs to have a grasp on different subjects like psychology, science, medical, history, possibly politics, and more. For example, it wasn't until I joined the military that I really got an interest in both psychology and war and history and how everything played on one another to get us to where we are today. And all of that knowledge really made a huge impact in how I'm approaching my stories and my world building. And it's made it far richer than when I was 18. So remember, knowing more information than just literature is very important for stories. Now, number four, I had a lot to learn about the industry and marketing. Writing a book is a whole process that is far more than just putting words to paper. There's also conventions that are expected for each genre, for age groups, conventions expected for book covers, and even marketing. And while some of these aspects are ever evolving, like marketing and book covers, they're always going to have new trends. It's good to have a grasp on old trends, new trends, why they exist, and the expectations. And if you understand all this before you publish, it'll make your life a lot easier, especially in the indie publishing sphere. But even if you're going to traditionally publish, you want to have a good idea how the industry works because there are a lot of unpleasant surprises that authors have when they finally get that book deal. And you want to be prepared for that and make sure it's something you are okay with. For example, if you traditionally publish, you have no say in your book cover. You also have an almost non existent marketing budget by the publishing company. So you still have to do all that yourself. And then there's also pressure from publishing companies to add or take away content from your book. So you have to decide if it's worth it for you to go traditional or if you want to go indie, because there's a lot of work involved in indie. So the more you understand both sides of the industry, the more informed you are and the better choices you can make for you and your stories. Now, it wasn't really until recently that I really started learning about marketing and getting comfortable with the idea of it. Because if you're like me, marketing is not the most exciting part of creating stories. It's just not. But I am far more comfortable with the idea and how to do it than I was even a year or two ago. And that has made a huge difference in my confidence level when it comes to actually getting my work out there. And while I am definitely not an expert on marketing, I have a much better grasp than I once did. And there's one more reason I'm glad I didn't publish too soon. And this one's a little more personal and it's also kind of relevant to my Christian creators. It took me a long time to develop the disposition for criticism, online criticism. I can handle constructive, but the internet's criticism is not constructive. And I know I'm not alone on this. Many creators are very sensitive souls, and that's the scary part about putting our work out there is that someone is going to be incredibly mean to us. But I'm happy to say that I am now old enough, I've been through enough, and I'm confident enough not to be broken down by any haters online or bad reviews. I'm not going to get super depressed when people don't like my work or if they don't like me. And that is a very freeing place to be that I really only accomplished because of life experiences and age. I used to be a hardcore people pleaser, and I'm proud to say that I have recovered. And for the more Christian level of things, the hardcore people pleasing trait made me very afraid to put my work out, especially in a secular audience. This people pleasing trait was also a problem for me in my Christian walk when it comes to publishing. Because, like I've said before, in traditional publishing, you're going to get pressured by publishing companies, by agents to add content to your stories that you might not agree with. And you'll have fans that might not like your religious views. And the internet can be very mean. And I really felt this pressure when I was looking for literary agents, and everything that they were really hoping for on their manuscript wish list were things that as a Christian I can't create. And it was very discouraging. And it does cross your mind to compromise in some way. And it wasn't until I really gave my stories to God that I was able to get over that. And I'll talk about that in a testimony video, but it's never worth a compromise. I'm just going to say that. While my books and my content aren't for everybody, your books aren't going to be for everybody either. There's always going to be someone who hates it, and then you're going to have people who love it. And that's okay. That's normal. I'm sure you can think of plenty of books that a lot of people love that you absolutely dislike, or books that are just have a special place in your heart, and you know people who don't like them. And if you can accept that, you'll be all right. And don't look at the 1-star reviews, probably. But either way, waiting to publish is very beneficial because it gives you so much more experience and knowledge and skill. And then you can launch successfully with a well written book that will have a meaningful story. So don't be afraid to write a few books that are a dud. It's okay. Most authors have books that will never see the light of day. And if you are struggling with writing your book, I have a playlist that is solely dedicated to writing your book from start to finish. And remember, if you like my content and you want to support my channel, all you have to do is subscribe. And I'll have little freebies in my Substack or Patreon. I might get rid of the Patreon. I'm just figuring that part out. But definitely check out the Substack. I put free PDFs, little helpful guides. And as this channel grows and my whole business grows, we'll be adding more stuff over there. So go check that out. There is a free tier with plenty of good stuff. And remember, go write those books with excellence. because everything that you do as if doing it for the Lord.